Greetings everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on evolution of miniature art in India. When we talk about miniature art, it basically refers to one type of painting. So, painting as a topic would involve a discussion on different traditions and types. For example, mural tradition, which we have already discussed with reference to Ajanta and Ellora. Then miniature tradition, which basically refers to Mughal and Rajput school of painting. Then there is the nationalist tradition, which refers to the Bengal school, and the contemporary tradition, which includes calendar art. In today's lecture, our focus would be on evolution of the miniature tradition. The history of Indian miniature paintings can be traced to the 6th and 7th centuries, the time when Kashmiri miniatures first marked their appearance. Indian paintings can be broadly classified as the murals and miniatures. Murals are huge works that were executed on the walls of solid structures, for example, in the Ajanta caves or the Kailash Nath temple, and there were several other examples. Miniature paintings originated in India around 750 CE when the Palas ruled over the eastern part of India. Since religious teachings of Buddha accompanied by his images were written on palm leaves, they had to be miniature in nature because of the constraint of space that was there on the leaves. Then around 960 CE, similar paintings were introduced in the western parts of India by the rulers of the Chalukya dynasty. During this period, miniature paintings often portrayed religious themes. With the rise of the Mughal Empire, miniature paintings started growing on a level unknown before. Indian miniature paintings combined different elements, that is, elements of Persian style of painting as well as some indigenous forms. These miniature paintings further evolved under the influence of European style in the Mughal court. Even after the decline of Mughal Empire, there was continuous evolution of miniature paintings as the artists came to be patronized by several Rajput rulers of Rajasthan. Though influenced by the Mughal style of painting, the miniature paintings of Rajasthan had their own distinct features and often depicted the royal lifestyle as well as mythological stories of Lord Krishna and Radha, and there were several other themes as well. Most of these miniature paintings depicted the lives of kings, queens, as well as narrated their tales of bravery. Some of these paintings were also created to showcase the contribution of various rulers towards their subjects and kingdoms. Now, if we talk about different schools of miniature paintings, then one cannot limit oneself only to the Mughal school of miniature painting or the Rajput school of miniature painting. Beginning from the Pala style of miniature paintings, several schools of miniature paintings evolved in India over the course of several centuries, and these schools were the result of specific socio-religious, economic and political conditions that were prevalent in different parts of India. Though these schools were influenced by each other, they also had their distinct features. Some of the important schools of miniature paintings would be discussed now. So first of all, let us talk about the Pala school. The earliest Indian miniature paintings probably belong to this school, and it emphasized on the symbolic use of colors, and the themes were mostly taken from Buddhist tantric rituals. Images of Buddha and other deities were portrayed on palm leaves and were often displayed in several Buddhist monasteries. For example, in Nalanda, Somapura, Mahavira, then Odantapuri and Vikramashila. Pala style of paintings became very popular in several places beyond India. For example, Sri Lanka, Burma, Tibet as well as Nepal. Apart from the emphasis on symbolic usage of colors, some other important features of Pala school were the skillful and specific usage of lines as well as modeling forms by delicate and expressive variation. Also use of natural colors. Miniature painting, as has been repeatedly discussed, is a traditional style of art which is very detailed, and that is why it is not only the size but also the minute details that go with it. Because of their origins as illuminations, they are also painted to have as smooth a surface as possible. And it is also suggested that miniature art could have also been an influence of the medals of ancient Rome. Miniature art can be traced back to ancient Egyptian manuscripts also on papyrus scrolls. If we talk about world miniatures, then monks are often highlighted for their contribution to early miniature paintings, as they carefully worked on illuminating manuscripts. For example, the Celtic Book of Kells and England's Lindisfarne Gospels, both of which measured 9 by 12 inches. Some early manuscripts contained miniature paintings on several pages which depicted a very meticulous arrangement of life-sized flower arrangements on the border, and the history of miniature painting therefore is found in several other cultures and is definitely not limited to Indian cultural traditions. Miniature painting began out of necessity for illustrating documents and manuscripts to help those reading them during a time when many were not literate, and also at a time when painting had not been invented. So the miniatures helped to convey the story and the meaning of the written word, and hence it directly or indirectly became connected to the aspect of knowledge generation. Several sized illustrations were cut out of these books or documents so that they could be carried also over longer distances. So portrait miniature artists were commissioned to paint small portraits that were referred to as hand-held miniatures. Portrait miniatures were painted in larger sizes also. For example, master miniaturist Nicholas Hilliard, then Peter Oliver and Sir Charles William Ross, they all painted works that were of a different size. Now the next type of miniature painting that one can talk about are Persian miniatures. A Persian miniature is a small painting, whether a book illustration or a separate work of art, basically in an album. The techniques were basically they were comparable to the Western as well as to the Byzantine traditions of miniatures, and there was lot of emphasis on illuminated manuscripts. So it became a significant Persian form around 13th century, and the high point of this tradition was reached between 15th to 16th centuries. The tradition continued under some Western influence and also continued to influence painting traditions in several other countries. The Persian miniature was the dominant influence on several Islamic miniature traditions, especially the Ottoman miniature in Turkey and the Mughal miniature in the Indian subcontinent. The art form reached its peak mainly during the Mongol and Timurid periods, ranging from 13th to 16th centuries, and was greatly influenced by Chinese paintings as the Mongol rulers of Persia brought with them several Chinese artists to work in the courts. The mythical animals Burak and dragon were portrayed in a style which was similar to the Chinese Qilin and Chinese dragon, reflecting the Chinese influence on the painters who introduced watercolor techniques to Iran and also initiated different medieval schools of Persian miniature painting. So, Islamic angels were depicted as wearing the tight robes belonging to northern style of dressing up in China, and Persian miniature paintings of the Lichtenad and Timurid periods usually borrowed landscape styles also and landscape painting techniques as well from several contemporary Chinese schools that had developed during the Song dynasty and the Yuan dynasty. As you can see in these visuals that are being shared on the screen, this basically refers to the kind of influence of Chinese miniatures on Persian miniatures. Now, the next school of painting that one can talk about is of course the Mughal painting. Mughal painting, which is a spectacular style of Indian painting, generally confined to illustrations on the book and done in miniatures, and which emerged and developed during the entire span of the Mughal period. So, Mughal paintings evolved as a unique blend of Indian, Persian as well as Islamic styles. So, let us ask a question here as to what were the objectives behind the spread of miniature art, because the Mughal kings wanted some kind of visual record of their actions as hunters, as conquerors, as warriors, and very often their artists also accompanied them on hunting expeditions or missions of state or armed conflict, and they would record their deeds as animal slayers or as strong men who were fighting on the battlefield, and they depicted them in the great dynastic ceremonies of marriages. The painters focused mostly on the court scenes or royal portraits, some natural scenes as well as landscapes and hunting scenes. These were some of the important and favorite subjects. While Humayun and Jahangir encouraged paintings that portrayed events from their respective life, in Shah Jahan's reign, painters began giving importance to portraiture. So, we see that different Mughal rulers had a different aspect that was added to miniature painting. Some of the well-known miniature artists of Shah Jahan's rule were Bichetar, Anup Chatar, Chatarman, Inayat, Muhammad Nadir of Samarkand, and many more. In addition to portraiture, several paintings of the period also depicted groups of ascetics and mystics and several illustrated manuscripts. So, it was not as if only the themes related to Islam or Islamic philosophy were considered important. Mughal miniature paintings started to decline during the time of Aurangzeb, and henceforth we see that the artists, they started working in several other regions. If we talk about the influences on Mughal painting, then the Mughal style of miniature painting was largely responsible for an amalgamation of indigenous themes and styles along with Persian and even European themes and styles. So, we see the influence of European themes increasing from Akbar's time onwards. The arts of this period reflect a synthesis of foreign influences as well as indigenous elements, and the high point of Mughal painting presented a highly sophisticated blend of not only Islamic but also Hindu as well as European visual culture and aesthetics. And we also see that there was an element of these different religions that was finding their way in miniature art as well. And given this diverse and inclusive nature, the affluence of the artworks produced in India during this period surpassed the conventional and indigenous art forms. The significance of this style lies in the purpose and efforts of its patrons and also in the unmatched skill of the contemporary artists. Together, they envisaged and expressed a congregation, an intermixture of tastes, philosophies and faiths, and all this was being conveyed through a visual language. The celebrated Mughal idiom that developed on the Indian soil should largely be understood as a result of interaction of these various schools. Thus, the Mughal style did not grow in vacuum. It was nurtured by direct interaction with several other art forms and with a broad-minded approach that was adopted. The indigenous Indian and Mughal painting styles coexisted. They assimilated the influences and various native talents in different ways. A very important role in this entire process was played by the Mughal atelier. The Mughal atelier consisted of specialized calligraphers, painters, binders, and all these artists, different categories of artists were contributing in their special ways. Paintings were recorded and documented. They were specifically used for specific events, personalities and also personal interests of the emperors, and they were mostly to be seen by the royals. The paintings were also made to suit specific sensitivity of royalty or also to address some kind of intellectual or spiritual stimulation. The paintings were a part of manuscripts as well as albums. The pre-Mughal and parallel indigenous schools of paintings in India had their strong distinct style, aesthetics as well as purpose, which continued. The indigenous Indian style emphasized on a flat perspective, a very strong use of lines, vivid colors, and also a bold modeling of figures as well as architecture. The Mughal style, on the other hand, offered subtlety and finesse. It portrayed almost three-dimensional figures, and also there was use of optical reality in most of these images. The royal court scenes, portraits, depiction of flora and fauna were some of the favorite themes of the Mughal artists. Now, let us look at the chronological evolution of miniature art as it evolved during the Mughal period. The Mughal painting ushered in a new style and sophistication to the Indian arts of contemporary period. The Mughal patrons largely contributed to the proliferation of this style of painting with their individual artistic preferences as well as a broad choice of subjects, philosophies as well as specific aesthetic sensibilities. So first of all, let us talk about Babur as to what was his contribution. Babur had a dynamic taste for a variety of arts. He is famous as a man of letters and also a keen patron of art, manuscripts, architecture, gardening, etc. So Babur's detailed accounts in Baburnama, his autobiography, are narratives of the emperor's political as well as artistic endeavor. Baburnama reflects the love and fondness that Babur had as an outsider for Indian land, for ecology, flora and fauna. And with his fervor for detailed writing, Babur established a tradition of keeping memoirs, records, a practice that was later on carried by his successors. The books and albums that were produced in the royal ateliers were not only calligraphed but they were also painted, and hence they were a very special contribution. These books were preserved and passed on to members of the royal family, or they were gifted to those who were perceived as the deserving candidates. Babur also had a keen eye for portraiture, and this is also recorded in his memoirs. Among several artists who find mention in Babur's memoirs is Behzad. Behzad's work, the famous work, was Princes of the House of Timur, which was probably developed around 1545 to 1550. As you can see in this visual that is being shared with you on the screen, this is Behzad's Princes of House of Timur. Behzad was a master artist from the Persian school of painting, Herat, and was known for his sophisticated color schemes, as you could see in this visual also. Also, Shah Muzaffar finds a mention as a painter who Babur thought excelled in the representation of different styles. Although Babur spent little time on Indian soil, his successors made the country their own and became and carried on part of this heritage. Thank you.